The chlorine smell hit Karen's nostrils as she pushed through the community center doors. Designer swimsuit hidden beneath her white terry cloth robe, she'd driven 45 minutes for the grand opening of Riverside's exclusive pool facility. But when she rounded the corner, her manicured fingers trembling on her phone, not just empty of people, empty of water, empty of everything, just concrete and shadows where paradise should have been. 911? I need to report a crime, she whispered, her voice cracking with the kind of rage that comes from a woman who's never been told no. What she didn't know was that her call would unravel a secret, that Karen Mitchell adjusted her rearview mirror one final time, checking her makeup with the precision of a surgeon. The reflection that stared back was everything she'd worked to. Perfect. Over her 43 years, blonde highlights that cost more than most people's rent. Lips plumped to Instagram standards, and the kind of tan that screamed, "I have a dermatologist on speed dial." She smoothed her white linen cover-up and grabbed her monogrammed pool bag from the passenger seat. The Riverside Community Center loomed before her like a monument to suburban achievement. Its glass facade reflected the late afternoon sun, creating an almost celestial glow that made Karen's chest swell with satisfaction. She'd fought tooth and nail to get this place built, attending every city council meeting, rallying the neighborhood association, and making sure her voice the loudest and most persistent was heard above all others. Finally, she murmured, stepping onto the pristine concrete walkway in her designer flip-flops. The sound of her steps echoed against the building's modern architecture, each click a small victory march. She'd earned this moment. After months of construction delays, permit issues, and what she called bureaucratic incompetence, the pool was finally ready for its grand opening. The automatic doors whooshed open, releasing a wave of cool, chlorinated air that made Karen's skin tingle with anticipation. She'd specifically requested they keep the temperature at exactly 72 degrees, warm enough to be comfortable, cool enough to be refreshing. The marble floors gleamed under the recessed lighting, and the sound system played soft jazz that created the perfect ambience for what she'd envisioned as her personal oasis. "Excuse me," Karen called out to the teenager behind the reception desk, her voice carrying the authoritative tone she'd perfected during her years as president of the Willowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. "I'm here for the pool opening." "I'm Karen Mitchell. I assume you know who I am." The girl looked up from her phone, her bored expression unchanged. She couldn't have been more than 16. With purple streaks in her black hair and a nose ring that made Karen's eye twitch involuntarily. "Pool opening. Yes, the pool opening." Karen's smile remained fixed, but her voice carried the subtle edge that usually made service workers scramble to attention. "I received confirmation that it would be ready today. I specifically arranged my schedule around this." The teenager her name tag read. Ashley glanced at her computer screen with the kind of sluggish movement that made Karen's blood pressure spike. I don't see anything about a pool opening today. Are you sure you have the right date?" Karen's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her pool bag strap. "Of course, I have the right date. I coordinated this entire event. I spoke with your manager, Mr. Henderson, just yesterday. He assured me everything would be ready by 4 o'clock. "Mr. Henderson isn't here today," Ashley said, returning her attention to her phone. "He's at some conference in Phoenix." The first crack appeared in Karen's composure. She'd specifically chosen today because it was the only afternoon this week that didn't conflict with her yoga class, her book club, or her standing appointment at the salon. She'd blocked out 2 hours for what she'd planned as the perfect Instagram photo session, her in her new Hermes swimsuit, artfully posed by the pool's edge, the afternoon light hitting her just right. "Then get me whoever's in charge," Karen said, her voice rising just enough to make Ashley look up again. "I don't care if it's the janitor. Someone needs to explain to me why I drove all the way here for nothing." Ashley sighed with the dramatic flair only teenagers could master. "The pool area is through those doors," she said, pointing toward a set of double doors marked with a cheerful pool and recreation sign. But I don't think Karen was already moving, her flip-flops slapping against the marble with increasing urgency. She pushed through the doors without waiting for Ashley to finish her sentence, her mind already composing the stern review she'd leave on every platform she could find. The nerve of these people, treating her like some random customer when she'd practically single-handedly made this facility possible. The chlorine smell hit her immediately, that sharp, clean scent that promised pristine water and endless summer days. Karen's irritation began to dissolve as she stepped into the pool area, her eyes adjusting to the softer lighting. This was it. This was her moment. But as she rounded the corner, her designer sandals squeaking against the wet tile, Karen stopped. Dead in her tracks. The pool was empty. Not just empty of people, though she'd expected it to be relatively quiet during the soft opening, but completely, utterly empty of water. What stretched before her was nothing but a vast concrete depression, its surfaces gray and uninviting under the fluorescent lights. The diving board jutted out over nothingness like a diving board to nowhere. The lane markers hung uselessly from their starting blocks, swaying slightly in the air-conditioning breeze. Karen blinked hard, certain she was seeing things wrong. She'd driven 45 minutes through traffic. She'd rearranged her entire afternoon. She'd told all her friends on social media that she'd be posting photos from the exclusive preview of Riverside's new aquatic facility. "This is impossible," she whispered, stepping closer to the pool's edge. The concrete walls were bone dry, with no sign that water had ever touched them. There wasn't even any equipment, running no filters, humming, no circulation pumps, creating the gentle movement that gave pools their life. Her phone was in her hand before she'd fully processed what she was seeing. The device trembled slightly as she opened her camera app, taking photos of the empty pool from multiple angles. Evidence she'd need evidence for the lawsuit. She was already planning in her head. "Ma'am?" The voice came from behind her maintenance worker in navy coveralls, his face lined with the kind of weathered experience that came from years of dealing with facility crises. "The pool area is supposed to be closed to the public today." Karen whirled around, her white cover-up billowing dramatically. "Closed? Closed? Do you have any idea who I am? I'm Karen Mitchell. I'm the one who made this entire facility possible. I sat through months of city council meetings. I organized the fundraising campaign. I personally ensured that every permit was filed correctly." The man's expression remained neutral, but Karen caught the subtle eye roll that people always thought she didn't notice. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but upset?" Karen's voice echoed off the empty pool walls, magnifying her words until they sounded almost manic. "Upset doesn't begin to cover what I am right now. I have a confirmed reservation. I have emails. I have documentation proving that this facility was supposed to be ready for its grand opening today." She was scrolling through her phone now, her thumb moving frantically across the screen. "Here," she said, thrusting the device toward the maintenance worker. "Email from Gerald Henderson, dated yesterday at 2:47 p.m. Looking forward to seeing you at the pool opening tomorrow. Everything is on schedule." The man glanced at the phone, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, I think there might be some confusion. The pool has been delayed indefinitely. We're having issues with the filtration system." "Issues?" Karen's voice cracked on the word. "What kind of issues?" "Engineering problems. The whole system needs to be redesigned. Could be months before it's operational." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. Grand opening. She'd invited her book club for a pool party next weekend. She'd bragged to her neighbor Janet about having exclusive access to the facility. "This is unacceptable," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Completely unacceptable. Someone is going to pay for this. Someone is going to fix this. Right now." The maintenance worker took a step back, recognizing the look in Karen's eyes. He'd seen it before, the expression of someone who'd never been told no, who'd never had to accept that the world didn't revolve around their convenience. "Ma'am, I really think you should talk to management about this. I'm just here to management." Karen laughed, but there was no humor in it. Management is apparently in Phoenix, living it up at some conference while paying customers are left to deal with this disaster. "Do you think this is acceptable? Do you think it's okay to lie to people, to waste their time, to make promises you can't keep?" Her voice was rising again, echoing off the empty pool walls and the high ceiling. Other employees had started to gather at the edges of the pool area, drawn by the commotion. Karen noticed them and felt a surge of satisfaction. Good. Let them all witness what happened when you disappointed someone. Officer Marcus Rodriguez had been on the Riverside police force for 8 years, and in that time, he'd responded to every conceivable type of emergency call. Domestic disputes, break-ins, car accidents, noise complaints, but never in his entire career had he been dispatched to investigate what the emergency operator had logged as pool-related fraud at Community Center. He pulled his patrol car into the Riverside Community Center parking lot, noting the handful of cars scattered across the pristine asphalt. The building gleamed in the late afternoon sun, its modern architecture a stark contrast to the older, more modest structures that dominated the rest of the neighborhood. This was clearly a recent addition to the community, the kind of facility that spoke to rising property values and the increasing gentrification of what had once been a working-class area. Rodriguez grabbed his notepad and adjusted his duty belt as he walked toward the main entrance. Through the glass doors, he could see a small crowd gathered near what appeared to be the reception desk. As he got closer, he could make out a blonde woman in white, gesticulating wildly, while a group of employees stood in an awkward semicircle around her. The automatic doors opened with a soft whoosh, and Rodriguez stepped inside, just as the woman's voice reached a crescendo. "Complete violation of consumer protection laws, and I refuse to be treated like some common." She stopped mid-sentence as she noticed the uniformed officer approaching. Her expression shifted instantly from indignation to satisfaction. Finally, someone who understands the seriousness of this situation. Rodriguez pulled out his notepad, his expression neutral but professional. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Rodriguez. I understand you called 911 to report some kind of fraud." Karen straightened her shoulders, smoothing her white cover-up as she prepared to deliver what she clearly considered crucial testimony. "Yes, Officer Rodriguez. I'm Karen Mitchell, and I've been the victim of deliberate misrepresentation and consumer fraud." She gestured toward the double doors leading to the pool area. "I was promised exclusive access to this facility's pool. For its grand opening today, I have documentation, meals, confirmations, the works. I drove 45 minutes through traffic, rearranged my entire schedule, and when I arrived, there was no pool." Rodriguez glanced toward the pool area doors, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, when you say there was no pool, do you mean I mean exactly what I said?" Karen interrupted. "No pool, empty, dry as a bone, not under construction, not being filled completely, empty. And these people," she waved her hand dismissively toward the gathered employees, "are trying to tell me it's been delayed indefinitely due to some mysterious engineering problems." Officer Rodriguez looked around the group of employees, his gaze settling on the maintenance worker who'd been dealing with Karen before his arrival. "Sir, can you explain what's happening here?" The man stepped forward, clearly relieved to be talking to someone with authority. "Officer, I'm Danny Vasquez, maintenance supervisor. The pool area has been closed for weeks due to safety concerns. The filtration system isn't working properly, and we're waiting for parts to fix it." "Safety concerns." Karen's voice shot up an octave. "Nobody said anything about safety concerns. You said engineering problems. Now it's safety concerns. Which is it?" Danny shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, it's both. The engineering problems created the safety concerns." Rodriguez made a note on his pad. "And this woman had a reservation for today." "That's what she says," Danny replied carefully. "But I don't handle reservations. That would be Mr. Henderson, and he's out of town." Karen pulled out her phone with theatrical precision. "Officer Rodriguez, I have proof right here. Email confirmation from Gerald Henderson, facility manager, dated yesterday at 2:47 p.m. She held the phone out to him. Quote, "Looking forward to seeing you at the pool opening tomorrow. Everything is on schedule." End quote. Rodriguez examined the phone screen, noting the email header and timestamp. It certainly looked legitimate. "Ma'am, did you pay any money for this reservation?" "Of course, I paid money," Karen said, her voice dripping with the implication that anyone who asked such a question was clearly not understanding the gravity of the situation. "I paid a premium rate for exclusive access, $200 for what was supposed to be a private 2-hour session." The officer's eyebrows rose slightly. $200 for 2 hours at a community center pool seemed excessive. But he'd learned not to question what people were willing to pay for convenience. "And you paid this to Mr. Henderson directly?" "I paid it to the facility," Karen clarified, "through their online reservation system. I have the receipt, the confirmation email, everything." Rodriguez was beginning to understand why Karen had called 911. While it might not rise to the level of criminal fraud, there was clearly some kind of miscommunication or misrepresentation happening here. Ma'am, have you tried to contact Mr. Henderson directly to resolve this? His phone goes straight to voicemail, Karen said, and his email auto-response says he's at a conference in Phoenix and won't be back until next week. Next week? Rodriguez turned to Danny. Is that correct? Danny nodded reluctantly. He's at the National Recreation Facility Management Conference. 3 days. Karen's laugh was sharp and bitter. So while paying customers are being defrauded, he's living it up in Phoenix on the company dime. Does that sound like responsible management to you, Officer Rodriguez? Before Rodriguez could respond, a new voice joined the conversation. Excuse me, but I think there might be some confusion here. Everyone turned to see a woman in her 50s approaching from the administrative offices. She was professionally dressed in a navy blazer and slacks, with the kind of confident bearing that suggested management experience. Her name tag identified her as Linda Chen, assistant manager. Ms. Chen, Rodriguez said, grateful for what appeared to be a voice of authority. Can you help clarify what's happening here? Linda looked around the group, her expression troubled. Officer, I'm not sure what Mrs. Mitchell was told, but the pool has been closed for 3 weeks. We've been trying to reach everyone who had reservations to offer refunds or rescheduling. Karen's face flushed crimson. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Then explain this. She thrust her phone toward Linda, showing the email from Henderson. Linda took the phone, her frown deepening as she read, This is very strange. Mr. Henderson sent this yesterday. Yesterday at 2:47 p.m. Repeated. Are you saying he lied to me? I'm saying this doesn't make sense, Linda replied carefully. Gerald knew the pool was closed. He was involved in the decision to shut it down until we could resolve the safety issues. Rodriguez felt the familiar prickle of intuition that came when a simple complaint started revealing larger problems. Ms. Chen, is it possible that Mr. Henderson forgot about the pool closure when he sent this email? Linda shook her head. That's impossible. He's been dealing with the contractor disputes all week. The pool closure has been his primary concern. Contractor disputes. Karen's voice had taken on a new quality less entitled outrage and more. Genuine concern. What kind of contractor disputes? Linda and Danny exchanged glances. Ma'am, I don't think Officer Rodriguez, Karen interrupted. I think there's more going on here than anyone wants to admit. Someone is lying, and I want to know who and why. Rodriguez was beginning to think Karen might be right. The story wasn't adding up. A manager who sends confirmation emails for a pool that's been closed for weeks, contractor disputes that nobody wants to discuss, and employees who seem nervous about questions they should be able to answer easily. Ms. Chen, he said, I'm going to need to see the pool area myself, and I'll need copies of all reservation records for the past month. Linda's professional composure flickered for just a moment. Officer, I'm not sure we can, ma'am. This is now part of an official investigation, Rodriguez said firmly. Mrs. Mitchell has presented evidence of potential fraud, and I need to determine whether criminal charges are warranted. Karen's smile was triumphant. Finally, someone who takes this seriously. As they walked toward the pool area, Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something much bigger than a simple scheduling mix-up. The employees were too nervous, Linda was too evasive, and Karen's evidence was too concrete to dismiss. The pool area doors swung open, revealing the empty concrete basin that had triggered Karen's call to 911. But as Rodriguez examined the space more carefully, he noticed details that suggested a different story than the one he'd been told. The pool wasn't just empty, it looked like it had been hastily drained. Watermarks on the walls showed recent water levels, and the pool deck was still damp in places. Equipment was running in the pump room, which didn't make sense if the pool had been closed for weeks. Ms. Chen, Rodriguez said, his voice taking on a more official tone, this pool doesn't look like it's been closed for 3 weeks. It looks like it was drained recently. Linda's face went pale. Officer, I can explain, ma'am. I think you'd better explain very carefully, Rodriguez said, because right now, Mrs. Mitchell's fraud complaint is starting to look legitimate. Karen stepped closer to the pool's edge, her designer flip-flops clicking against the wet tile. Officer Rodriguez, look at this. She was pointing to something near the deep end. Those are She'd seen embezzlement cases before, the forged documents, the creative accounting, the elaborate schemes that always seemed brilliant until they fell apart under scrutiny. But as she listened to Officer Rodriguez's briefing, she realized this case had an unusual twist. It had been cracked open by a customer complaint. "So, let me get this straight," Kim said, reviewing Rodriguez's notes. "Mrs. Mitchell calls 911 because there's no water in the pool, and that leads us to discover that the facility manager has been running an unauthorized side business." "That's the short version," Rodriguez replied, "but I think there's more to it. The assistant manager, Linda Chen, is holding back information." Kim looked around the pool area, taking in the details that Rodriguez had noted. The watermarks, the functioning equipment, the fresh scuff marks on the pool bottom, evidence of recent use. Where is Mrs. Mitchell now? Waiting in the lobby with Ms. Chen, she's been persistent in her desire to see this through. Kim almost smiled. She'd dealt with plenty of persistent witnesses. But something about Rodriguez's tone suggested that Karen Mitchell was in a category all her own. "Let's talk to her." They found Karen in the lobby, pacing back and forth in front of the reception desk like a caged animal. She'd removed her white cover-up, revealing the designer swimsuit underneath a bold statement that she'd come prepared for a pool day and wasn't about to let anyone forget it. "Mrs. Mitchell," Kim said, approaching with her badge visible. "Detective Kim, I understand you're the one who brought this situation to our attention." Karen stopped pacing and fixed Kim with the kind of intense stare that had intimidated countless service workers. "Detective, I want to be clear about something. I didn't call 911 to uncover some elaborate fraud scheme. I called because I was promised a service that wasn't delivered, and I refuse to accept that level of incompetence." "But you're willing to cooperate with our investigation?" "Absolutely," Karen said without hesitation. "If Gerald Henderson has been stealing from the facility, then he's been stealing from the taxpayers who funded it, including me." Kim pulled out her notebook. "I need to understand exactly what Mr. Henderson told you about today's reservation." Karen launched into a detailed account of her communications with Henderson, producing emails, receipts, and even screenshots of their text message exchanges. Kim was impressed. Despite herself, Karen had documented everything with the thoroughness of a paralegal. "He was very specific about the timing," Karen explained. "He said the pool would be available from 4 o'clock to 6 p.m., and that it would be a private experience for what he called valued community members." "Valued community members," Kim repeated. "Did he explain what that meant?" "He said it was a new program for residents who had contributed significantly to the community center's development. People who had donated money or advocated for the facility." Kim made a note. "And how much did you contribute?" Karen's chin lifted slightly. "I donated $15,000 to the construction fund. I also spent countless hours at city council meetings pushing for the permits and approvals." $15,000, Kim said. "That's substantial." "It was an investment in the community," Karen replied. "And frankly, after everything I did to make this place possible, I felt entitled to some exclusive access." The word entitled hung in the air, and Kim could see Karen realize how it sounded. But before she could backtrack, Linda Chen approached from the administrative offices, her face pale and drawn. "Detective Kim," Linda said, "I think you need to see something." They followed Linda to a small office behind the reception desk, where she'd spread out a collection of documents across the desk. "I've been going through Gerald's files since you arrived," Linda said. "I found these." Kim examined the paper's reservation logs, payment records, and what appeared to be a second set of books. "Miss Chen, are you telling me that Mr. Henderson was keeping dual records?" "It looks that way," Linda replied. "The official booking system shows the pool as closed for maintenance for the past 3 weeks, but these handwritten logs show private reservations almost every day during that period." Karen leaned over Kim's shoulder to examine the documents. "Look at these names," she said, pointing to the handwritten entries. "Janet Whitmore, Robert Chen, Patricia Williams. These are all people from my neighborhood, people who donated to the construction fund." Kim studied the names and payment amounts, and these payments were all cash. "According to this, yes," Linda confirmed. "Gerald told everyone that cash payments would help avoid processing fees." "Processing fees," Kim repeated skeptically. "For a public facility, I know it sounds suspicious now," Linda said, "but Gerald made it seem like he was doing people a favor. He said the city's bureaucracy was too slow, that he could offer better service by handling things directly. Kim was beginning to see the scope of Henderson's operation. "Miss Chen, how long have these private reservations been happening?" Linda consulted the handwritten logs. "Based on these records, at least 6 months, maybe longer." "6 months," Karen said, her voice rising. "He's been running an illegal business for 6 months, using taxpayer-funded facilities." "Mrs. Mitchell," Kim said calmly, "I need you to stay focused on the facts. Can you tell me exactly how much you paid for today's reservation?" Karen pulled out her phone, scrolling through her banking app. $200, cash, just like he requested. "And when did you give him this money?" "Yesterday," Karen said. "He came to my house personally to collect it. Said it was more convenient than making me drive to the facility." Kim felt a chill. "He came to your house?" "Around 7 p.m. He seemed nervous, kept checking his phone. I assumed he was just busy with the grand opening preparations." Kim exchanged glances with Rodriguez. "Mrs. Mitchell, I think Mr. Henderson came to your house because he was planning to disappear. The conference in Phoenix might be a cover story." Linda's face went white. "Oh my God, you think he's fleeing?" "I think he knew the scheme was about to be exposed," Kim said, "and Mrs. Mitchell's call to 911 forced our hand before he could finish covering his tracks. That he might come back." "I'm saying we need to find Gerald Henderson immediately," Kim replied. "Rodriguez, I need you too. Contact Phoenix PD and see if they can locate him at this conference. Get the hotel information from Ms. Chen." As Rodriguez moved to make the call, Kim turned back to the documents Linda had found. "Ms. Chen, I need you to compile a complete list of everyone who made payments to Mr. Henderson for private pool access. Names, amounts, dates, everything." Detective Linda said hesitantly, "There's something else you should know." Kim looked up from the papers. "What? Gerald has been talking about selling his house. He listed it 3 weeks ago. Said he was ready for a change of scenery." The pieces were falling into place with alarming speed. Kim realized that Henderson hadn't just been running a side business, he'd been planning an exit strategy. The drained pool, the fabricated maintenance story, the convenient conference in Phoenix, it all pointed to someone who was preparing to disappear. "Mrs. Mitchell," Kim said, "I need you to think carefully in your communications with Mr. Henderson. Did he say anything about his future plans? Anything about leaving Riverside?" Karen furrowed her brow, scrolling through her phone. "Actually, yes. In one of his texts, he mentioned that this might be his last opportunity to offer the premium service. He said the city was implementing new regulations that would make private bookings impossible." "New regulations," Kim repeated. "Ms. Chen, are you aware of any new regulations affecting the facility?" Linda shook her head. "No, if anything. The city has been pushing us to increase public access and community programming." Kim's phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. "Phoenix PD checked the conference hotel. Henderson never checked in. Conference organizers say he was supposed to give a presentation tomorrow but never confirmed his attendance." "Mrs. Mitchell," Kim said, "I need you to stay calm, but I believe you may have been the catalyst that prevented a significant theft. If Mr. Henderson was planning to disappear with the money he'd collected, your insistence on getting the service you paid for disrupted his timeline." Karen's eyes widened. "Are you saying that my complaint actually helped catch a criminal?" "I'm saying that your refusal to accept no for an answer may have saved the taxpayers of Riverside a lot of money," Kim replied, "and possibly prevented other people from being victimized." For the first time since Kim had met her, Karen Mitchell looked genuinely speechless. The entitled customer who had called 911 over an empty pool had accidentally become a key witness in a major fraud investigation. Detective Linda said, "What happens now?" Kim looked around the pool area, at the empty concrete basin that had started it all. "Now we find Gerald Henderson, and we make sure he faces the consequences of what he's done." As if on cue, Rodriguez appeared at the pool area doors, his expression grim. "Detective, we've got a problem. Henderson's house is empty. Neighbors say they saw a moving truck there yesterday evening." Karen's gasp echoed off the... Detective Kim's phone rang at 6:30 a.m., jolting her from the 3 hours of sleep she'd managed to grab after working Henderson's case until past midnight. The caller ID showed Rodriguez's number. "Kim here," she answered, already reaching for her coffee. "Detective, we found Henderson's car," Rodriguez said without preamble. abandoned at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. Airport security footage shows him getting out of a taxi at the international terminal yesterday at 11:47 p.m. Kim was fully awake now. International terminal. Any idea where he was headed? That's the problem. He didn't fly out of Phoenix. TSA has no record of him going through security. The car was a decoy. Son of a bitch, Kim muttered. He's still local. How much money are we talking about? Mrs. Mitchell helped us contact the other victims last night. We're looking at least 47 people who paid Henderson for private pool access over the past 6 months. Conservative estimate, around $30,000 in cash. Kim whistled low. 30,000 that we know of. There could be more. Gets worse. I talked to Henderson's landlord this morning. His lease was month to month, but he paid 6 months in advance last week, in cash. He's been planning this for a while, Kim said, pulling on her jacket. I'm coming in. Have you talked to Mrs. Mitchell this morning? That's actually why I'm calling. She's been calling the station every hour since 5 a.m. Says she has new information. Kim arrived at the Riverside Community Center 40 minutes later. To find Karen Mitchell's white Mercedes parked in the first spot, engine still running, through the glass doors, she could see Karen pacing in the lobby. Phone pressed to her ear, gesticulating wildly as she spoke. Mrs. Mitchell, Kim called out as she entered the building. Karen immediately ended her call and rushed over. Detective, Kim, thank God you're here. I've been doing some investigation of my own, and I think I know where Gerald Henderson is hiding. Kim raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Mitchell, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is a police investigation. You need to let us handle he's at the Riverside Marina, Karen interrupted. Slip 47. He's got a boat. Kim stopped walking. How do you know that? Because I know everything about this community, Karen said with the confidence of someone who'd made it her business. To know everyone's business. Gerald Henderson bought a 34-foot cabin cruiser 6 months ago, paid cash, according to my friend Margie who works at the marina office. And you think he's hiding on this boat? I think he's planning to take it down the river too. New Orleans, Karen said. From there, he could go anywhere. The Caribbean, Mexico, South America, and anywhere without extradition treaties. Kim had to admit that Karen's theory made sense. Mrs. Mitchell, how did you come by this information? I called Margie at 6 this morning, Karen said matter-of-factly. I told her I was thinking about buying a boat and asked about recent sales. Gerald's name came up because he paid the full purchase price in cash, which is unusual even for the marina crowd. And you're certain the boat is still there. I drove by the marina 20 minutes ago, Karen said. Slip 47 has a boat in it, and there are lights on inside. Kim felt the familiar rush of a case coming together. Mrs. Mitchell, you should have called us before going to the marina yourself. If Henderson is dangerous detective, I didn't. Get out of my car, Karen said. I'm not stupid, but I am thorough. Kim had to give her credit. In less than 12 hours, Karen Mitchell had transformed from an annoying customer into an effective amateur investigator. Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to stay here while we check out the marina. Can you do that? Karen's expression suggested that staying put was the last thing she wanted to do. Detective, I want to see this through. Gerald Henderson took my money, lied to my face, and made me look like a fool in front of my neighbors. I have a right to be there when you arrest him, Mrs. Mitchell. You have a right to see justice done, Kim corrected. But you don't have a right to interfere with a police operation. Then deputize me, Karen said without missing a beat. Kim almost laughed. That's not how it works. Then how does it work? Karen's voice was rising again, taking on the familiar tone of someone who was about to demand to speak to a manager. Because from where I stand, I'm the one who uncovered this fraud. I'm the one who refused to let it slide. I'm the one who found out where he's hiding. And now you want me to sit here twiddling my thumbs while you get all the credit? Mrs. Mitchell, Kim said carefully. This isn't about credit. This is about safety. Fine, Karen said, pulling out her phone. Then I'll just call Channel 7 News and tell them about the police raid that's about to happen at the Riverside Marina. I'm sure they'd love to get there first and cover the story from the water. Kim stared at her. Are you threatening to tip? Off the media. I'm explaining that I have options, Karen replied coolly. I can either be a cooperative witness who stays in the background, or I can be a concerned citizen who exercises her First Amendment rights to inform the public about important developments in their community. Kim realized she was being expertly manipulated by someone who'd clearly had years of practice getting her way. "Mrs. Mitchell, what exactly are you proposing?" "I ride along in an unmarked car," Karen said. "I stay out of the way during the actual arrest. But I get to see Gerald Henderson taken into custody, and in exchange, I don't call the media until after you've secured the scene." Kim weighed her options. Karen Mitchell was a loose cannon, but she was also the key witness in the case, and if Henderson was indeed hiding on a boat, having Karen nearby to identify him could be useful. "Fine," Kim said finally. "But you follow my orders exactly. No arguments, no negotiations, no independent action. Understood?" Karen's smile was triumphant. "Understood." 30 minutes later, Kim found herself in an unmarked police car with Karen Mitchell riding shotgun, headed toward the Riverside Marina. Rodriguez and 2 other officers were following in a separate vehicle. While Harbor Patrol was positioning themselves on the water side of the marina, Slip 47 is in the far section. It's isolated from the main docks, which makes sense if you're trying to avoid attention. Kim had to admit that Karen's local knowledge was proving invaluable. "Mrs. Mitchell, when we get there, you stay in the car." "No matter what happens, what if he tries to run?" Karen asked. "Then we catch him," Kim replied. "That's what we do." As they approached the marina, Kim could see the boat Karen had described. Sleek cabin cruiser with tinted windows and Pennsylvania registration numbers. Lights were indeed visible through the windows, and there was movement on the deck. "That's him," Karen whispered, pointing to a figure visible through the boat's main cabin window. "That's Gerald Henderson." Kim raised her binoculars. The man on the boat was middle-aged, balding, wearing what appeared to be casual clothes. He was moving around the cabin with the urgency of someone preparing to leave. "He's getting ready." To cast off, Kim said into her radio, "All units, move in now." What happened next unfolded with the precision of a military operation. Harbor Patrol boats appeared from both sides of the marina, blocking Henderson's escape route by water. Rodriguez and his team approached along the dock, while Kim and Karen remained in position to observe. Henderson must have spotted the approaching officers because he suddenly burst out of the cabin and began frantically untying mooring lines. But it was too late. The Harbor Patrol boats were already alongside, and Rodriguez was stepping onto the boat's deck. Gerald Henderson, Rodriguez, called out his weapon, drawn but pointed downward. "Riverside Police, you're under arrest." From her position in the unmarked car, Karen watched as the man who had taken her money and lied to her face was handcuffed and read his rights. She felt a surge of satisfaction that was unlike anything she'd experienced before, not the petty triumph of getting a restaurant manager fired or a customer service rep disciplined, but the deeper satisfaction of seeing real justice done. "Detective Kim," she said quietly, "I want you to know something." Kim looked over at her. "What's that?" "Mrs. Mitchell. Bad service, slow Wi-Fi, parking spots that are too narrow, but this ... this actually mattered." Kim watched as Henderson was escorted off the boat and into a police van. "Mrs. Mitchell, sometimes the people who complain the loudest are the ones who notice when something's really wrong." "Is that your way of saying my entitlement served a purpose?" Karen asked with a wry smile. "I'm saying that your refusal to accept inadequate service accidentally prevented a theft that could have cost this community a lot more than $30,000. Kim replied, "Henderson was just getting started. If he'd successfully disappeared, he probably would have tried the same scam in another city." As they drove back to the station, Karen reflected on the past 24 hours. She'd gone from being an angry customer to a key witness to an amateur investigator, and for the first time in years, she felt like her demanding nature had actually made a positive difference. "Detective Kim," she said, as they pulled into the police station parking lot, "what happens to the money he stole?" "Evidence until the trial," Kim replied, "then hopefully return to the victims." "Good," Karen said, "because I want my two who..." 3 months later, Karen Mitchell stood at the edge of the Riverside Community Center pool. Watching the crystal-clear water shimmer under the afternoon sun, the filtration system hummed quietly in the background. The lane markers swayed gently in the current, and the diving board gleamed with fresh paint. Everything was exactly as it should have been on that day in July when she'd first arrived to find an empty concrete basin. "Mrs. Mitchell." Linda Chen approached from the pool office, clipboard in hand, and a genuine smile on her face. "Your reserved time starts in 5 minutes. Is there anything special you need for today's session?" Karen adjusted her new swimsuit knot. The designer, Hermes, she'd worn that first day. Just the usual, "Linda, 2 hours, lane 4, and make sure the water temperature is exactly 78 degrees. "Already checked it this morning," Linda replied. 78.2 degrees. Karen nodded approvingly. In the 3 months since Gerald Henderson's arrest, the Riverside Community Center had undergone a complete transformation in management philosophy. The new facility director, Maria Santos, had implemented a customer service program that bordered on the Karen couldn't have been happier as she settled into her preferred lane. Karen reflected on how much had changed since that afternoon when she'd called 911 over an empty pool. Henderson had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution. To his victims, the $30,000 in cash had been recovered from a safe deposit box he'd rented under a false name, along with an additional $40,000 that investigators discovered he'd embezzled from other municipal contracts. Over the past 2 years, but the real transformation had been in Karen herself. "Mrs. Mitchell," a voice called from the pool deck. Karen looked up to see Detective Kim approaching, wearing civilian clothes and carrying a small gift bag. "Detective Kim," Karen said, swimming to the edge of the pool. "What brings you here?" Karen hauled herself out of the pool, accepting the towel that Linda immediately provided. "You didn't have to bring me anything." "Actually, I did," Sarah said, handing her the gift bag. "Open it." Inside was a coffee mug with Honorary Detective printed on the side, along with a certificate declaring Karen Mitchell an outstanding citizen volunteer for her assistance. In the Henderson investigation, Karen's eyes misted over an unusual occurrence for someone who prided herself on maintaining perfect makeup at all times. "Sarah, this is really thoughtful." "There's more," Sarah said. "The City Council voted last week to name you to the Community Center Advisory Board. Apparently, they decided that someone with your attention to detail and willingness to ask hard questions would be valuable in preventing future incidents." Karen sat down heavily on a pool chair, still dripping wet. "They want me on the advisory board." "The mayor specifically requested you," Sarah said. "He said, and I quote, 'If Karen Mitchell is happy with our community services, then we know we're doing something right.'" For once in her life, Karen Mitchell was speechless. The woman who'd built a reputation on demanding better service, speaking to managers, and refusing to accept substandard treatment, was being asked to help set the standards for an entire community facility. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "The FBI wants to use the Henderson case as a model for training agents to recognize municipal fraud. They want to interview you about how you identified the inconsistencies that led to the investigation." Karen found her voice. "They want to interview me about my investigative techniques. Apparently, your refusal to accept the initial explanations and your documentation of every detail impressed the federal investigators," Sarah explained. "They said most fraud cases are solved by accident, but this one was solved by someone who simply refused to be dismissed." Karen looked around the pool, Ariat, the sparkling water, the properly functioning equipment, the attentive staff who now treated every customer concern as a priority. "Sarah, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I've been thinking a lot about that day when I called 911, Karen said. "I was so angry about the pool being empty, but I was really angry about feeling like nobody cared about my time, my money, or my expectations." She paused, watching a group of children take swimming lessons in the shallow end. "I spent years complaining about things that didn't really matter because I felt powerless about the things that did matter. But when I found out that Henderson was stealing from people like me from our community, realized that sometimes being demanding isn't about entitlement. Sometimes it's about justice." Sarah nodded. "Sometimes the people who make the most noise are the ones who care the most." "Exactly," Karen said. "And now I get to channel that energy into something constructive." A commotion near the pool entrance caught their attention. "I specifically reserved the entire pool for a private party, and you're telling me that's not possible?" Maria remained calm but firm. "Sir, as I explained, we no longer offer exclusive private bookings. The pool is a public facility, available to all community members during regular hours." "Do you know who I am?" the man demanded. "I'm Richard, Blackstone. I donated $25,000 to this facility. I expect certain accommodations for my generosity. Karen's jaw tightened. She recognized the type immediately, another wealthy resident who thought his donation entitled him to special treatment. 3 months ago, she might have sympathized. With his position today, she saw something else entirely. "Excuse me," Karen said, standing up and walking toward the confrontation. "Karen," Sarah warned quietly, "remember what we talked about?" But Karen wasn't planning to lose her temper. She'd learned something valuable over the past few months. There was a difference between demanding what you deserved and demanding special treatment at others' expense. "Mr. Blackstone?" Karen said, extending her hand. Blackstone's expression shifted slightly as he recognized her. Karen Mitchell's reputation in the community was well established. "Her at your own peril." "Mrs. Mitchell," he said cautiously, "perhaps you can help me explain to this woman that major donors deserve certain considerations." Karen smiled, but there was steel in her eyes. "Actually, Mr. Blackstone, I think Maria is doing her job exactly right. You see, I learned something recently about what happens when facility managers start offering special deals to people they think are important." She gestured toward the pool. "This facility belongs to everyone in the community. Your donation was generous, but it wasn't a purchase of special privileges. It was an investment in making sure everyone, regardless of their economic status, has access to these amenities." Blackstone's face reddened. "Are you seriously lecturing me about community values?" "I'm sharing what I learned when I helped expose a fraud scheme that could have cost this community hundreds of thousands of dollars," Karen replied evenly. "Special treatment for wealthy donors is exactly how these problems start." Sarah stepped forward, her detective instincts activated by the mention of the Henderson case. "Mr. Blackstone, I'm Detective Kim, Riverside PD. I investigated that fraud case Mrs. Mitchell mentioned. I'd be happy to explain how private bookings were used to embezzle funds from this facility." The fight went out of Blackstone immediately. Everyone in Riverside had heard about the Henderson case by no end. Everyone knew that Karen Mitchell had been instrumental in solving it. I see," Blackstone stammered. "I wasn't aware of the full situation." "Now you are," Karen said, "and I'm sure you understand why Maria has to follow the new policies. They're designed to protect everyone's investment in this facility." After Blackstone left, Maria approached Karen with obvious relief. "Mrs. Mitchell, thank you. I wasn't sure how to handle that without offending a major donor." "Maria, you handled it perfectly," Karen said. "Never compromise on doing what's right just because someone waves their checkbook around. Trust me, I learned that lesson the hard way." As Sarah prepared to leave, she pulled Karen aside. "You know, 3 months ago, you were the one demanding special treatment," Karen laughed. "3 months ago, I thought special treatment was my right, because I'd paid for it. Now, I know the difference between getting what you've paid for and getting more than what others can access. And what's the difference? Justice," Karen said simply. "Getting what you've paid for is justice. Getting more than others just because you can afford it." She looked around the pool area one more time, taking in the sight of families enjoying the facility together, children learning to swim, elderly residents doing water aerobics, and teenagers hanging out in the shallow end. This was what she'd really been fighting for all along: not exclusive access, but equal access, not special treatment, but fair treatment. "Sarah," Karen said, "I have a confession to make." "What's that?" "I actually like this pool better now that it's full of people. Turns out, an empty pool isn't nearly as satisfying as a pool, TH.